Starting a business venture on an action plan. Learn all about it. Grade 11s, let's kick it. Chapter 15. Let's see what's entailed in starting a business on an action plan. We've been through transforming a business plan into an action plan. Now we're going to start the business with this action plan. I hope you've been enjoying the videos, grade 11s. Please let me know by giving me a thumbs up and commenting down below how informative and helpful these videos have been for you. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that I don't take any credit for the information given in this video and the slides today. I have accessed this information via the Western Cape Education Department website. They have free resources for all students to learn and to go through. They've got awesome books, quizzes, so do check it out. I will put the link down below as well as the end of my video in my resources. So please do check them out. I think they are brilliant and it's awesome to go through and just test yourself, because we all know Term 3's tests are coming up real soon. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, starting a business venture on an action plan. So we're going to look through the aspects that should be considered when initiating a business. They are here above and we will go into each of them in further detail. So we've got strategy, operations, productivity, the size of the business, the culture, training, and quality of staff, risk, customer service and change, market research, and business cycles. So, strategy. A strategy is a plan of action that must be carried out by an entrepreneur. An action plan outlines the vision, mission, goals, and objectives. The action plan must be used to develop the systems and processes for the business. Then continuing, operations. The business plan, action plan identifies the operational plan, the timelines, and key deliverables. Operations need to be implemented, staff need to be trained and employed. Resources must be acquired and managed continuously. Constant monitoring and evaluation needs to be done to ensure that resources are used effectively. Productivity. The action plan includes budget and financial planning. Budgets need to be assessed and amended. Costs need to be decreased and outputs increased. To ensure productivity, costs need to be decreased and outputs increased. Improvements need to be implemented constantly to improve profits. The size of the business. The success of a business depends on its management and staff. The bigger the business, the more difficult it is to manage. It is difficult to keep control of the quality of each of the employees, work and productivity levels. Okay. The reason why it's more difficult to manage a bigger business is because a bigger business is going to have more staff, and more staff sometimes comes with more problems. I use the example of a company that's striking. If we have an employee base of 200 employees, if 50% strike, that's 100 people striking. That's a lot of people. If we've got a business of 10 people and 50% strike, that's 5 people. It's not acceptable, obviously, and it's not advisable, but it's easier to manage 5 people that are unhappy than 100 people that are unhappy. And also, a bigger business comes with bigger costs, bigger profits as well, but it does, as I say, become difficult to manage. Just think about how many employees are working for big companies, and if something gets stolen, it's a bit trickier to discover and come to find who the culprit was versus a smaller company. Culture, training, and quality of staff. It's essential to establish an organizational culture from the beginning so that staff are familiar with what is acceptable. Staff need appropriate training to achieve the desired outcomes and deliver the best quality. Managers should also ensure that all new staff know about the dress code. Different companies have different dress codes. Some companies, like Pick n Pay, for example, their tellers all have the same t-shirts and they've all got the same tops and I think skirts as well. So that have the branding of Pick n Pay on it. Whereas other companies are maybe a bit more smart casual, and then you've got your corporate companies. So depending on the dress code, and new employees need to be informed of this. Then risk and change. All businesses need to take risks and amend the original action plan several times because things are constantly changing. The introduction of new technology or machine may influence a budget, and it may be necessary for the business plan to be adapted. Management and leadership must be flexible to adapt to changes in the market and the macro environment. Customer service. A successful business gives customers what they want. Businesses need to change their market plan, adjust their products and prices to ensure sales increase. They should also establish a good relationship with their customers. So I look at customers get what they want. A very nice example here with customer service is what KFC is currently doing. So KFC is doing the swap the meal if it's not up to standard. So I think about their chicken. Sometimes when you go to KFC, their chicken can be a bit greasy. So they've got this where you swap it out. So if you have a bit of the chicken and you notice, listen, this is a bit greasy, they will swap it out for you. And that's exactly giving customers what they want. Customers are looking for quality. KFC wants to ensure customer service and quality. And this is a very good way that they do this. Then we have market research. Businesses should conduct ongoing market research to identify profitable markets for their product. Many businesses benefit from conducting market research in local and familiar markets. Business cycles. Businesses obtain profit and experience losses. Changes in the macro and market environment can either be positive or negative on the business operations. Businesses should constantly make adjustments to reduce costs where possible. Reducing costs increases profitability. Then we look at the factors to consider before you start up your company. So the culture of the organization, the environmental changes, customer service, business growth, cost saving, risk and change, and then we will look at other factors too. So the culture of the business. Establish an organizational culture so that the staff are familiar with what is acceptable. Ensure that a code of conduct is in place and enforce it from the start. The staff must know the dress code and the code of conduct from the business from the start. They must ensure that staff know the culture of the business and their behavior does not damage the business image. Environmental changes. Continue to network and research to avoid changes in the business environment, which may upset the business operations. Consider the risk and success factors. Plan for risks and minimize the impact. Then, customer service. Make an effort to satisfy the needs of customers. Change the action plan accordingly to adapt to the needs of the customers. Establish a good relationship with customers. Business growth. Managed and backed up growth by using solid strategy. The success of a business is often dependent on its management and staff. Devise a suitable strategy to manage and control a larger group of employees. Keep control of the quality of each employee. Cost saving. Cut costs by controlling unnecessary expenses. Then, risk and change. Management and teams must be flexible to adapt to changes in the market. The original action plan may need to be changed and amended several times. The introduction of new technology may influence the budget. Then, just other factors to consider when starting up a business. Planning and minimizing the environmental impact on the business. Action plans to satisfy the needs of customers. The resources of raw materials and suppliers. The source of funding that the business would use, the forms of ownership that will be used by the business, the registration of the business, the location or business premises that needs to be used. So I would advise, when it comes to this question, and they ask, discuss the factors that must be considered before startup, and it's for 8 marks. I would advise, it would probably be for 6, sorry. I would advise not to mention these other factors at the bottom, because generally they want us to list it, so like risk and change, and then explain it. So just a tip, I personally wouldn't use these ones at the bottom unless it's a listing kind of question. But if it's for 6 marks, then we know we need to list and explain. All right, so just note that, and just a tip. Then acquiring funding. Reasons why businesses need funding. All right, so they require funding to cover the startup costs, which include the premises, the machinery, and raw materials. Just an example there, I was at an event for hockey just over the past weekend, and there was I don't know what you want to call it, a coffee station, a coffee food truck type of vibe. And they had these awesome coffee machines where you press a button and it made all the different types of coffee. So a mocha, a cappuccino, a normal coffee, espresso. So instead of them grinding down the coffee and making it manually, this machine did it all. But I then thought, business-wise, if a person had to start this company, those machines cost a lot of money. You're looking in the 100,000s. So that's exactly where we're talking about machinery, raw materials, even equipment to start up a company. Depending on the company, some companies are cheaper to start up than others, but it all depends. Then we also need funding to run the business and have enough money to pay our employees and suppliers of raw materials. Pay for the cost of input such as wages, telephone, and other expenses. Expand the business as the orders or sales increase and bigger premises need to be established. So just an example here from my experience with my YouTube channel, I see it as a business because it is monetized. Yay, it's quite an achievement. But there were costs that were involved. I didn't just start YouTube and not have any costs. From those who have been with me since 2020 from the beginning, you'll know that there was a stage I wasn't uploading because my laptop couldn't run editing software and the programs. So I needed to invest in a new laptop. That was quite a knock, and there was quite a lot of money involved in that. I also, which I don't use as much anymore, I invested in a small microphone. I got a new phone, so it works better now with the microphone, but I had to invest money into that small microphone that I used to wear. I also invested into a tripod, and I used TubeBuddy to help me with my analytics and help me with my video creation. So even something as simple as YouTube and starting that app and wanting to make a profit off YouTube by making videos, there were costs for me involved in as well. So as I say, it depends on the business, but even in my experience, I also had to put money in for me to do YouTube. Then sources of funding. Equity capital. Equity capital is the total amount of money and assets invested in a business by the owner that comes from their own sources. Capital is contributed by the owner and referred to as the owner's interest. Owner's equity increases when the owner puts in additional funds to expand the business. The benefit of putting own capital into the business is that it encourages a commitment from the owner. Then, issuing of shares. New companies can issue shares to obtain capital. Shareholders receive a share certificate as proof of ownership. The memorandum of incorporation and prospectus list the details of the shares that are offered for the sale. Ordinary shares are the most type of shares offered by companies to shareholders. All shareholders receive a portion of the profits called dividends. Then debt capital. There are quite a few in this section. Many businesses need to borrow funds. The business plan will indicate how much debt capital is crucial for business funding. The business sources of finance are available to entrepreneurs. So we've got a bank loan. The business can borrow money from the bank. The amount will be specified for a set period. Interest is payable on the loan. The period can be fixed for the time of the loan on a variable in line with the current interest rate. Trade credit. This is the time that a business has before it has to settle its debt. Suppliers usually allow a small business a period between buying materials and paying for them. Then, continuing, a bank overdraft. This is when a bank allows you to draw more money than what is deposited into your bank account. The bank decides on the maximum amount to be drawn, known as an overdraft limit. The business pays interest on the amount they withdraw and for the period they have withdrawn this amount. Then, back to sources of funding, leasing and hire purchase. Businesses can lease certain assets from suppliers. Assets such as machinery, vehicles, computer systems can be leased. A fixed amount of money is paid monthly in order to use this asset. The lease agreement can be renewed when an asset is returned or replaced. Grants. Grants are funds that are received from the government departments or local development agencies and other organizations that support small business developments. The business can qualify for government support to help get started. The main advantage of grants is that it is cheap financing. Venture capital. Financing is given in exchange for a share in the business as it starts up. Some venture capitalists also request a position in management or on the board. Angel financing. These are often wealthy entrepreneurs who offer financing in exchange for a share in the business. This carries a high risk for the investor. A very, very good example here that you can use for an essay is the program Shark Tank. They have investors that invest into companies that present their ideas onto the program. There is a shoe company where they've got an exchangeable heel. I can't remember. I think it's called Passion Shoes. And then there's another one that's called Scrub Daddy. It's a little sponge and it's got a little smiley face. I know I've seen it at Macro that you can buy. So they went onto Shark Tank and actually got funding from these investors that we're referring to. Then, factors that will influence your choice of funding. The nature of the financing. This depends on the owner if he or she wants to use their own or borrowed capital as well as short-term or long-term loans. Amount of capital that is needed. Remember I said each business, it depends, the capital will be different. Business owners usually use their capital if a small amount is needed. The larger the amount of capital that is needed by owners will have to look at borrowed capital as well. Obviously, the risk. Providers of own capital are usually willing to accept greater risks than providers of borrowed capital. Interest on a loan is legally compulsory and may lead to a liquidation of the business in bad economic circumstances. Cost of finance. Businesses will generally choose the funding with lower costs or interest. The income earned on borrowed capital must exceed its cost, otherwise it will be a disadvantage to the holders of own capital. Borrowed capital may be cheaper because the holders of their own capital may require a higher income owing to the higher risk. Period of financing. If needed for a long period might rather use their own capital because borrowing would be too expensive over the long period. Availability. If more own capital is not available, the business might be forced to use borrowed or other ways around this. Tax considerations. Interest on borrowed capital is tax deductible. Dividends on own capital is not tax deductible. Alrighty, we've reached the end of the video. Here's a nice little mind map, a summary of this chapter and what we've gone through. I would advise you to pause the video at this stage, jot it down. It's just a nice little mind map that you can go through when testing yourself and just revising for when the tests come up. Here are the resources that I mentioned in the beginning of my video that I've used to make the slides for this video. I want to thank you so much for watching my video. Grade 11s, I hope that you've been enjoying this. Please let me know in the comments down below. I wish you guys all the best of luck for the tests that are coming up. I know my students are writing at the end of August, so crunch time is nearing soon. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Please do give it a thumbs up if you liked it, and please consider subscribing to my channel. I hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye for now.